Hello, and welcome to Strategic Leadership with Paul Gilbert. Today, I'm really excited about our episode. We are going to have a wonderful discussion with Congressman Don Beyer, and we're going to be talking a lot about strategy. And we're going to be looking at a political campaign that happened a very long time ago, decades ago, rather obscure for most people. But because it was a long ago and a little obscure, it makes for a perfect sort of test bed for us to look at the actions that were taken and how those actions relate to strategy. So really excited to get into that. Let me introduce my guest today and a really good friend of mine, Congressman Don Beyer. Congressman Don Beyer is a business leader. He owns car dealerships in Northern Virginia. He's the former Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. He's the former U.S. Ambassador to Switzerland and Liechtenstein, and he's a current member of Congress from the Virginia 8th Congressional District. So welcome, Don. So one of the unwritten rules in Virginia politics is there's an election every single year because state elections run in odd years and federal elections run in even years. So every single year is an election year, and you're not supposed to announce your candidacy while another race is still going on. So basically you have 1 year or less. You have 11 months to announce your candidacy, 11, 12 months, and run. But you figured out a way to get around that rule and get people talking and organized and moving forward. So when I started working for you, it was not Don Beyer for Lieutenant Governor. It was Don Beyer Leadership 89. It was a very vague, mysterious title that no one knew what you were running for, but you had buttons and brochures and all of this stuff out there without saying what role you were going to run for other than something you were going to run for next year. Tell us about that and what was your thought process? I think it was a brilliant way to get around the unwritten rule.
Yeah, well, one of the things I knew is that having no base, no political base, no fundraising base, the only name recognition base I had was from the car dealership, that I had to start early. So and I certainly couldn't go out there with the Don Beyer for Lieutenant Governor a year and a half ahead of time. We were in the middle of the 88 presidential race. So the Leadership 89 worked really nicely. It got everybody intrigued. People thought, well, who is he? And of course, after 3 minutes in the conversation, I'd be able to say, instead of saying, hey, Paul, I'm running for Lieutenant Governor. I'd like your support. To flip the conversation and say, Paul, I'm thinking about running for Lieutenant Governor. What do you think about that? Is this a good idea? How could I? And you engage people as partners rather than asking them for a commitment. And people are so polite that almost all would say, well, let me, first of all, people love to be asked for advice too. And so I got to spend the first 6 or 7 months of that campaign into December. I'm just asking people what they thought about my running for Lieutenant Governor.
Well, I think it was brilliant. It created far more buzz than if you had said what position you were running for. Because I actually have never seen it done before or since, but it was a great way to build a campaign for mystery position. Everyone loves a good mystery. I'm sure it sparked many more conversations among potential leaders in the Democratic Party than would have been sparked if you just said what you were running for.
It really was a largely invisible campaign for the first 9 or 10 months. And we didn't have TV, we didn't have radio, we had almost no direct mail. And instead, and it's not possible in Virginia today, but at that point, we were still doing caucuses, assembled caucus in rural Virginia and firehouse primaries, which are still caucuses in Northern Virginia. So right after that 88 Democratic convention in Virginia Beach with the Leadership 89, I started by myself and then with you, driving all over the state. At that point, there were 134, 135 cities and counties in Virginia. Everyone had a Democratic committee. In South Side, they had the White Democratic Committee and the Black Voters Leagues. and they were parallel, both Democrats. And we went to see the leadership of every one of those. Often, at a local Denny's or Hardee's or McDonald's or whatever the general store version was in that particular small town, and just reaching out and saying, "Hey, Linda, what do you think about my running for lieutenant governor, and how would I do here in Wythe County? And who else should I be talking to?" And it was very quiet. It got almost no press. But at the end of the day, a caucus procedure is about signing up delegates. And we had, I think there was 4,000 or 3,950 delegates in that convention. And that first 8 or 9 months was just about recruiting those people willing to kick in $20, or if they didn't have it, we would kick in the $20, and getting them to show up on that one day in March.
So speaking of that quiet campaign to go everywhere and meet everyone, one of the most clear memories I have was one of the first trips that you and I took to Southwest Virginia. We left Northern Virginia and we, drove about 8 hours to go to Wise, Virginia. And we went to the 28th annual Squirrel Dinner. And, the room was filled with people wearing camouflage, and we were the only ones with a tie. And we sat down and had a dinner of squirrel and sweet potatoes and and good conversation with very good people. But talk about off the radar. There were no other candidates for statewide office there, and it demonstrates how you were going everywhere. Anywhere there was a group of folks who would be key to the voting decision, you were breaking bread with them.
Yeah, and I was so out of my depth at that Squirrel Dinner. It was wonderful fun. At one point, they had all these little black balls, and I said, "What are these guys?" They said, "They're Brussels sprouts." So I popped one or two in my mouth. It didn't taste like Brussels sprouts, and they said, "No, those are the squirrel brains." And it wasn't bad. But I think the larger point was just showing up was really, really important, and especially in rural America. And by the way, in the convention, I won every one of the 210 delegates from Southwest Virginia. It was 210 to nothing. It makes a difference when you show up and go into their homes.
I remember sleeping on a sofa in a coal miner's house, and that was good stuff. We could have easily been, 5 miles down the road in some hotel, but staying in their house, breaking bread with them, waking up, having breakfast with them, It
was, we're talking big picture strategy. One of my favorite strategic ideas is that the only difference between truly great drivers and average drivers is that the truly great drivers are looking farther down the road to see what's coming. They're anticipating. And that the best leaders are the ones who, just to steal the cliche, trite thing, are worried about the next generation rather than the next election. But to be less trite, are really thinking about what are the long-term ramifications of the decisions we make and of the investments that we make. So back to the campaigning, making those investments in the human relationships that reverberate throughout the community is a wonderful way to build and earn trust. People don't just give you trust. You've got to have the integrity to earn it over time.
So your comment
One of the other pieces on that too is in far Southwest Virginia, Cumberland Gap, Daniel Boone, the whole deal, Lee County. And I remember going there maybe with you in '89 for a Sunday afternoon dinner, 1 o'clock. Oh, they must have had 150, 200 people there. Huge turnout. And I got a call from the organizer, many calls. Evelyn worried that I was going to be late. And this is 1989. She said in 1971, 18 years early, Lieutenant Governor Sarge Reynolds was an hour late to that dinner, that Sunday afternoon dinner, and they were still upset about it 18 years later. And she did not want me to fall into that category. And ever since then, I've also realized that timeliness, especially with people who are not used to being respected, who feel often undervalued in our society, is really, really important.
Absolutely. One of the most interesting, fascinating things about this campaign in '89 was what happened with the nomination. The election happened, and it was an election of delegates that were pledged to one candidate or another. But this time there was a big block of delegates that were undecided. So they were elected to go to the state convention, but they hadn't decided which candidate they were for. So they were it was still up in the air. And conventional wisdom said that there would be a floor fight on the state convention, and it would be decided there. And you didn't accept that conventional wisdom at all and took a totally different path. Tell us about that.
Well, I really did want it to go that far. So one of my aphorisms that you probably heard me repeat 100 times is that all politics is personal. I actually found out in the 1997 governor's race, some of it's wholesale too, and it's not personal, but at least at a convention level, it's still largely personal. So the afternoon of the first caucuses, when it was clear that the caucuses themselves would be indeterminate, that there was going to be a block of about 600, 630 delegates elected uncommitted, not to my friend Dick Saslaw, my opponent, or me. And so we got FedEx mailing to all of them that afternoon. So it showed up the next day, and that made the whole case. And we're pretty sure that my opponent wasn't going to do that. So sometimes it's squeaky wheel stuff. So we put up on a big board in the little campaign office all 635 names of the people that were undecided and their phone number and where they were. And my dear wife, who was a reporter, still is a reporter, but she was working for News Channel 8 at the time, came in, and she and I tried to call everyone every day. And when they said, okay, we commit to you, we take the name off. And I think they had magnetic strips. And if they were committed to Dick Saslaw, we took their name off. And so the 635 began to shrink. And we did a couple of road trips, probably you and I. I remember going to Buchanan County, I think. And they had something like 21 uncommitted delegates, and they gathered them all, and we had a little conversation, and we got all 21 just by virtue of going. And it took about 3 weeks. There was about 2.5 or 3 months between the caucuses and the convention. But 3 weeks later, we were able to have a press conference that said, we have enough committed delegates now that I've won the nomination. And my opponent sputtered for a day and then said, actually, yep, you're right, and graciously withdrew. So it wasn't a contested convention. And he, by the way, has been the most wonderful friend over these last 30 years.
So a Sun Tzu quote is, the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. And probably one of the reasons your relationship is so good with Senator Saslaw is that there wasn't a floor fight. It didn't get ugly. It was just kind of a brilliant effort to not take the traditional conventional wisdom. Conventional wisdom was get ready for a floor fight on that convention floor. And you decided to win before that day ever came around.
Well, the two final ideas from me, Paul. One is that my wife is really big on people having quote unquote moves. You know, what's the interesting twist you can do that bursts things up, especially because momentum does shift back and forth. And sometimes it shifts and you've got nothing to do with it. It just, something happened in the larger world. But can you find some kind of move that can move that momentum back in your direction? And the other one is whatever you devote your attention to in your life grows and changes. Whatever you want to excel at requires you to put an awful lot of attention into that objective. And it doesn't guarantee success, but it does guarantee growth and change.
Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to this episode of Strategic Leadership. I hope you have come away with this with new insights. I know I have. And I want to thank again Congressman Don Beyer for being our very special guest today. Thanks so much, Don.
Thank you, Paul, very much. I'm very proud of you. Keep teaching.
All right, thanks.